So trust life. Sounds like an instruction. Could be a suggestion or recommendation. But when you hear that, the first thing that we might sense into is like, I'm not sure that's a good idea just on its face. Life can be really challenging, right? Difficult things can happen. Life's uncertain. These bodies are vulnerable. Things can change at any moment. The next phone call, next diagnosis, next news flash, next car ride. Things can change in a hurry. And these bodies are vulnerable. I mean, we know we might not choose to hold it in mind often, but we know deep down that there is old age and death ahead of us as certainties. So when we come along and say, well, trust life, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea. Is life really trustworthy? So, like a lot of things, it depends on what we mean by the word trust, of course. If we mean by trust that we expect life to always go the way we want it to go, like I trust life to do what I want it to do, then obviously there's a flaw in that. I mean, probably by age 3, we've all accumulated enough evidence to know that things don't always go our way. And yet, for some reason, even as adults, decades later, there's still some expectation or hope that somehow they should. You might not say that out loud, or if there are friends around that might hear us say it, but I mean, there is this sort of expectation that things will go my way, to the point that when they don't, I feel hurt. I feel disappointed. Life let me down. Right? Life's not trustworthy. We can see that assessment is coming from a very individual point of view. It's not, really looking at life as a whole. It's looking at, whether life delivers what I want it to deliver or not. And sort of like having a friend. If a friend, treats me right and says what a great person I am, then I like them. Right? But if they change their mind, I have a different opinion. But we all know deep down that life will do what it does, right? It's not a revelation, hopefully, that life doesn't always go the way you want it to go. So we can also, rather than looking at, let's say, life as a whole, we can look at this same principle even on the level of personal relationships. There can, be this sense of, let's say, a relationship, a marriage, and then something goes a different direction, the divorce is in the wind, and then there can be the sense of, how can you betray me like that? I trusted you, you promised, and now, you're doing something that that's just unacceptable. How could you hurt me like that? I trusted you to be there forever. So here's by so we can see that what we mean by trust then is really an expectation of how the other person is going to be, and we can see that it's really um, comes from our own wanting. Like what's best for me? Do I want this relationship to continue? And when the other person doesn't, we put the blame on the other person, right? They broke my trust. They betrayed me, right? That's how it's often phrased. Um, but what what in all likelihood happened is that somehow the behavior began to just deviate from what was expected. But the expectation is that it wouldn't. I mean, it's not like we enter into relationships. I mean, it's not like we've never heard of divorce or we've never heard that relationships sometimes end, but we just somehow assume immunity from that. And when it doesn't happen, then we have this sense of betrayal, maybe jealousy, maybe hatred, maybe regret that I ever got into it in the first place. Those kind of feelings. But what actually happened is the person maybe decided to go in a different direction. So if we use trust in that sense, I trust that you will always do what I expect and desire that you do. Then that has potential um, for causing pain and suffering in the future, because it might not always be the case. And it can feel like that kind of trust can feel almost like noble, like I trust you to be there for me forever. Here's a gift I'm giving you, my trust to you. But when we look at it a little more closely, it's sort of a strategy, isn't it? It's sort of a wanting to sort of, pin this other person into a behavior that will match my hopes and expectations. So is that really freeing for the other person, or is it more an attachment? So the difference can be quite subtle there, but the sense of using the word trust in that sense is different than using the word trust in the sense of I trust that the other person will always do what they do, be as they are, say what they say. I trust them to be exactly as they are in every moment. I don't know what that might look like in the future. They might surprise me sometimes. They might do something where I may choose not to hang out with them anymore. That's possible. But if the trust is in the other person being exactly as they are, and they do something that surprises us, there's not the same basis for holding on to anger, resentment, hatred, jealousy. Right? Those emotions always come about as a result of our expectations being dashed. Right? So if we go back to life and look at that in the same way, if we look at life as expecting it to always work out in our favor, I mean, we all know that, often, maybe not a majority of times, or maybe more than a majority of times, things happen that we wish were otherwise. And if our expectation is that they shouldn't be like that, we're forever in this battle of being disappointed in life, disillusioned. I thought life was going to be better than this. I thought life was going to be happier. But the other way of looking at it is Can I trust life to be as it is? Always. Can I allow life to be as it is? Right? Life doesn't need our permission, right? Life will do what it does. It's not waiting around for us to grant this right. The difference is when we allow life to be as it is, then we're not in opposition to life. Then we're not continuously disappointed by life because we don't expect it to be a particular way that's to our advantage. We can just see that life is as it is, as it always is. So in that sense, it has a great trustworthiness. Not trustworthy to do what we want it to do, but trustworthy to be as it is, absolutely as it is. And we can be on board with that or not. The only difference is when we're not on board with that, we suffer. When we hold ourselves back from life, apart from life, trying to, energetically maneuver life in a certain direction, and it doesn't work out that way, then we suffer. But it's not life that's at fault. It's the attitude that somehow I deserve this, or I'm entitled to this, I expect this. Do you ever watch bowling tournaments and they take a few steps and roll the ball down the lane? The ball has already left the person's hand, but it happens slowly enough before it gets to the pins that the bowler has a chance to sort of go through these bodily contortions as if they somehow have psychic abilities over the direction the ball's going to go, and you can see them, sort of moving this. In college, I wasted many hours playing billiards, and they used to call that body English after the ball had left the cue. Somehow by contorting your body, that it would affect you didn't do it consciously, but you tended to do it anyway. And but we do the same thing sort of energetically, emotionally with events in life. We sort of hold this energetic psychic posture to try to influence the course of life in our favor. Yeah. So it's this energetic tension, almost like I just wanted to go this way. So we can look at what we're talking about at another level altogether, and that is the sense of whether God is trustworthy, the divine. So this was the question that actually came up last week, where someone asked about trusting God when there was so much distress and harm and evil in the world. Yeah. So again, it comes back to definitions. What do you mean? What do you mean when you use the concept God? So if what you mean is a loving entity, then the question is, well, if there's an all-loving entity, why are these really difficult things happening? Why are people getting killed, assaulted, maimed, harmed? The other relevant attribute here is whether God is all-powerful, right? And same question. If it's an all-powerful divine force, should be able to just eliminate evil, right? Just take, you have good over here, evil over there. Just wipe the left side clean, and then you're just left with the good side. But even the concept of love demands hatred. I mean, the concept of love wouldn't have any meaning unless it was being compared to something else, some other possibility. So the issue here is if there's an all-loving God and an all-powerful God, and bad things happen, then either the God that we're talking about isn't all-powerful, or isn't loving, or just doesn't care that much to allow things to happen. But I'd suggest this is all, that whole structure is being held together from holding a viewpoint as a human. That whole sense of how things should be, how things should work out. I would say, the views that we have about good and evil on this planet are different than the views of trees and insects would hold of what's good and evil. So those concepts are very are generated from the human perspective. But again, it's from our individual perspective of what I think should happen, my assessment of what's right, what's wrong, which is really what I want, what I don't want, what I want, what I don't want. So this causes great difficulties in sort of getting our heads around those kind of concepts, and it causes real angst with people that are trying to wrap their heads around those kind of ideas conceptually. But I'd suggest that the whole approach can be something entirely different. And if instead of an individual divine remote entity that involves itself occasionally in creation with varying results, I would suggest that we can look at it in an entirely different way, and that is as the potential, the infinite potential to manifest in an apparently infinite number of ways, unlimited potential. And from that perspective, if it is indeed infinite, then it includes everything. Nothing is beyond possibility. And isn't that our direct experience, that all those possibilities exist? We can say, well, they shouldn't. It's not right. But the reality of it is that's what exists. So we can say, well, God is responsible for all the good things, and then we have to create some other entity that's responsible for all the bad things. But I think the possibility of a much deeper understanding is that all is possible. Nothing is beyond that potential. And we can see that. We can see that in the world. So again, the question is, can I trust life to be as I want it to be? No. Can I trust life to be as it is? Yes. Can I trust that infinite potential to show up in an amazing, creative, beautifully manifest world with all its possibilities? Can I trust it to be that? Yes, that's what we see. That's the freedom to exist in that space. So we can talk about that, and it can sound like, okay, maybe theoretically, but as a practical thing, it's still not a good idea, right? So it's probably helpful to take an example here. So let's just take one issue, current issue. Let's take in the U.S. Wealth inequality. Right. So we can, if we really look at how that happens, those that are wealthy, I mean, either they inherited it through no claim of their own other than they were fortunate in their birth, or they were fortunate in their DNA and intelligence level and schooling that they were privileged enough to go to, or a sense of ambition and responsibility, and that they learned probably to a great extent growing up in childhood. And those things, when we look at them, are also nothing that can be claimed as credit by those people. Again, fortunate birth, fortunate circumstances, maybe caring parents, good teachers, all of which are a result of conditions largely beyond our control. And the same group of very wealthy people are also benefited by tax laws, which are passed by also privileged, people that were born in good circumstances or had fortunate things happen to them during their life. I'm speaking very generally here. And then we can also look at people struggling in poverty. How many of those people are also resulting from their particular circumstances at birth at a young age, levels of intelligence, levels of schooling, employment opportunities, peer pressures, the availability of mentors, the affordability of schools. All these things are beyond their individual credit or blame, right? So we can just see that this is how things are. That one set of conditioning leads to this circumstance, another set of conditioning, not always clearly, but often leads to these circumstances. And when we really look at how that all evolves, where's the blame? Where's the wrongness? See everybody acting out of their conditioning. So if we clearly see this, then we can say, okay, this is how it is, right? We're not approaching a situation from right or wrong. We're not approaching it from a sense of righteousness. And I know how things should be and shouldn't be. We can approach it from how things are. And this is how things are. We can see that everybody, all of us, are functioning to a very, very large extent out of circumstances over which we had very little control. And we worked with those as best we could over a lifetime. So then the question is, okay, we can accept perhaps that this is how it is on this just one particular issue. And then the question is, what do you do about it? Okay. So in terms of what we do about it, it's a function of whether we really care about it or not, or it's just an opinion that we have that's sort of occupying a certain amount of psychic energy that we have. If that's the case, I'd ask, who is it benefiting? Not benefiting the situation. It's not benefiting you physically or mentally. Perhaps it's not something to be holding this, body English about. Okay. But maybe, let's say maybe it is. Maybe it's one of your top 5 issues. And then probably the next thing is, like they teach in medical school, first do no harm. Because there's probably been as much harm done over the course of history in the name of making the world a better place than for probably any other reason. So it's useful to really look at our own motivations for wanting to be involved. I mean, it's a delicate area. It really is. It feels like, well, obviously I should do something to help if I'm motivated in this area. But when we really look at it, what is that motivation coming from? Is it coming from a sense of guilt? Is it coming from a sense of, I know better? Is it coming from a sense of, there's merit to be earned here? It's a delicate area. So let's say we get past the do no harm phase, and so then we can look and just see that whether I have the true interest in that as a particular issue. Do I have the skills to actually do something of value? Do I have the time and energy? Right. So we can just look at that, and then we're free. It's not like we're doing it because we should do it, or I'll be a better person if I do it. It's just like, okay, is there a movement? Is there an energetic movement to get involved in this particular issue, right? And then if we move from that space, we're not moving from a prior agenda. We're not moving from right and wrong. We're not moving from good and bad, should and shouldn't. We're just moving out of what there's an inclination, a sincere inclination to do, and then we can do what we do. I mean, maybe we, I don't know, lobby to pass some more equitable tax laws. Maybe we, start a company that is based on, respect and equality, however that looks. Maybe we decide to teach in inner city schools. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we decide to, one afternoon a week, we tutor some kid that needs it for 2 hours. I mean, whatever our capacity and level of interest is, that, but it comes from a different place than the place of they're wrong, I'm right. That sense of righteousness will diminish any activity that we have in that area. Because there's a sense, right, if we're working with other people, if we're coming from a sense of righteousness, that's felt, right? And there's a resistance there. So if we're, so anything that we're in opposition to, and we act from that point of opposition, we actually strengthen what we're opposed to. we give it the gift of our energy. That oppositional energy is energizing. I mean, look at the evening news. You see that play out. It is, both sides are energized by that opposition. Hatred increases the resolve of those that are hated. Resentment increases the intransigence of those that are resented. Disapproval, well, we were all teenagers, so you know how that works, right? Parental disapproval is, oh, well, it worked in our case. So the point here is that if we can really see that life is as it is, and it can be trusted to always show up that way. May surprise us, often does. But if we're not holding ourselves in opposition to that, then we are free to move in response to that rather than in reaction to that. And that movement comes from a different place. That movement comes, what we're left with in that case is just awareness, presence for whatever may be needed in that circumstance. And if we're coming from awareness, then it's not coming from this personal set of conditioning that tends to always look out for itself, right? Not as a so we don't try to hold ourselves as awareness at first, to be a good spiritual person or religious person, but just see that that's actually the case, that awareness is capable of responding to situations, and it can be trusted, right? It can be trusted because it's always there. It's always there as that sense of presence. And that awareness has an intelligence to it to respond because it's not encumbered by our past and our conditioning. It's just aware. It's fresh. And so when that awareness responds, it has a different flavor. We can look at that and wonder why should we trust life, right? There might be a sense of, actually, I don't like life as it is all that much anyway, so why should I want to just be with life as it is? If I don't do something about it, if I don't try to change it, it'll just go on being as it is. And in fact, it feels like almost like life is a big enough mess already, and if I just let it be as it is, it may be the last straw. I mean, I may be the one holding it all together. If I sort of loosen my grip, then who knows what will happen, right? There can be that sense. But again, this is just sort of this holding on to the way I want it to be rather than trusting life to be as it is. This question of trust has a bit to do with the suspicion about life. Like, is life really beneficent, right? Is life really good, or is life something to be wary of? So Byron Katie had an interesting way to look at that. She said, life isn't something that is done to us, it's something that is done for us. Right? So whether or not there's a cosmic law in place like that, it's what I would call a useful construct. Right? So if we take life to be something that is done to us, where we always have to be on our guard, wary, protective, defensive, life feels different. If, on the other hand, we take life to be something that is trying its darndest to reveal how it is to us at all times, then it feels different, right? It feels open, receptive, curious. And so there's an opportunity to learn from life, to see it ever more clearly. So if we take it, whether there's an ultimate truth there or not, I think it's a good functional relative truth. Where if we take life as being a source of learning, always trying its best to show us something. When things happen, even when difficult things happen, there'll be a different attitude, right? So I've said this often enough, but I think when most of us look back on our life, that we can all remember difficult times, maybe really, really difficult times that we would never want to have to go through again. And yet there's a sense of, I don't regret having done it, because it seems like the biggest transformations in life happen not through when everything goes our way, but when things don't. We get a fresh look at how things actually are. And this life is real good at nudging us more and more into that direction. And there is a feedback loop happening there. The more we allow ourselves to not resist and resent whatever it is that's happening, the more it flows. So by not resisting or resenting, I don't mean that we have to like everything that happens. We won't. And I don't mean that we are frozen from acting, because that's not what it means at all. Right? So from a conditioned body-mind perspective, of course, we'll prefer some things over other things, no question. But that's different from allowing life to be as it is. Life will be that anyway. So we're not giving up anything. It sounds like we're giving up something of great value that we're holding, and then we're giving life, but actually we're just acknowledging what's true. And it also doesn't prevent us from acting. Sounds like it would, but it actually allows us to get to the point of effective action much quicker. If something happens and we spend hours or days or years even sort of regretting and blaming and should haves and what ifs, and it was their fault, and why is this happening to me, and we haven't even gotten to first base yet in terms of dealing with the issue. We're just resenting life circumstances. But if we allow life to be as it is, then okay, that's what's happening. Then how do we move from here? So we eliminate all the mental anguish, that sense of suffering, really the delay in dealing with the issue. Okay, there's so this question of allowing everything to be as it is means and includes even the mean things, just the ugly things in the world, no shortage of them, right? So allowing everything to be as it is means everything. And there can be some resistance to that, like, that doesn't sound like a good idea. I have to have some standards. But the fact is, we do that already. We do it already from awareness. Awareness already is aware of whatever appears within its field. Sometimes it's pleasant, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's mundane, sometimes it's amazing, sometimes it's ugly. But from the perspective of awareness, all of that can appear and does over the course of a lifetime. But if all of that appears within awareness, awareness is larger than even that. Right? Awareness is large enough to encompass all of it, not just the good stuff, all of it. I mean, that's really what infinite means, infinite possibilities, infinite creation. It's what Walt Whitman meant when he said, "I am large. I contain multitudes." This is, from that perspective, from the perspective of awareness, where's the separation? Where are we holding ourselves back from life, if not just a thought? If all of that is appearing within awareness, and awareness is what we are, all of it, all of life is appearing within what we are. No separation. So when we say allow life to be as it is, we're not even granting something to something outside of ourselves. It's just the recognition that what appears within what we are is as it appears. Again, from a conditioned personal perspective, we may like it, we may not, we may choose to act on it, we may not. But from the simple recognition, all of that appears within what we are. So this is the basis for Nisargadatta's quite famous saying when he says, "When I look within, I see that I am nothing, and that's wisdom. When I look without, I see that I am everything, and that's love." And between those two, my world turns. Right? When I look within, there's nothing. It's just awareness, right? No thing. Nothing to stand on, just awareness. Absence of attributes. When I look within, there's nothing, and that's wisdom. When I look without, the multitudes are contained, right? All appearing within awareness. And that's love, right? Nothing held back. Nothing grasped, nothing pushed away, all of it appearing as life. no separation, no otherness. Nisargadatta is not saying, uh, when he looks without, I am everything. He's not saying it as a person, right? He's saying it as awareness, which he fully recognizes that he is. As awareness, I look without, and I am everything, right? What most of us do is look down at our body and say, that's what I am, that physicality. But that physicality is appearing within awareness, just like everything else. We make the distinction that, no, this is my body. That other stuff out there is not different. But it's all appearing within the one awareness. And that recognition is actually the basis of unity, all oneness. And then we come back to the question, can I trust that to be as it is? It is as it is. Couldn't be otherwise. And that's true not only for Nisargadatta, but for everybody, right? That is our beingness. When it's fully investigated, that's what can be realized, and that's the freedom. It's the freedom because it allows us to fully participate in this life, participate it in without fear, without a sense of self-limitation, freely, openly, non-judgmentally, compassionately, because we can see that in actuality there is no other. All appears within this one undifferentiated awareness, functioning through and as all of us already.